Good evening. This week's Parsha is Parshas Savo, and it's also Chai Elul, the 18th day of Elul, which is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and the Baal HaTanya. The Baal Shem Tov lived from 1698 until 1760, and he is buried in Mezhebush, where he lived, with his two grandsons. One, the Degel Machne Ephraim, is in that oil, and also Reb Baruch Mezhebush, two grandsons buried with him inside with their own distinct matzevas, and he was nifter in 1760. The Baal HaTanya was born in 1745 and nifter in 1813, and he lived 68 years, begematria Chaim. Now, there is a famous question. Well, last week, Hiseitze Sedra ended off with the story of Amalek, and we laid that as Parsha Zohar to be Makayim, the mitzvah aseh d'oraisa, the biblical commandment of Zachiras Mechias Amalek. Remembering, there's a mitzvah today. We don't do anything, but there's a mitzvah today to remember that we have a mitzvah to wipe out Amalek, because at their very essence, they are rotten. It's not like we could hope that they'll get better, or what do we want from them, but this was a nation that was created with the DNA and the qualities of destruction and evil. And that's why there's such a mitzvah to wipe out this nation. So we end off last week's Sedra with that, and then we begin our Sedra with Havoas Bikurim, that when Yidden came to Eretz Yisrael and they planted and they plowed and they harvested and whatever, that they had trees, and the fruit trees, the trees that were fruits, the first fruits were brought to Yerushalayim. It was not like Meiser Sheni, that you were allowed to sell it and bring the money and then just be poida, buy food in Yerushalayim that you would then eat. But these were actual fruits that had to be carried to Yerushalayim. So the question is, why is this story of Amalek right next to Havoas Bikurim? What does one have to do with the other? And the answer that Meforshim say is they begin with another question. If you look at the first page of Parshas Savo, it talks about the man who arrives in Yerushalayim, and there was a very big deal made of the bringing of these first fruits. As the Gemara says, there was a band, musicians, and when they saw someone coming into Yerushalayim, they began to play. In other words, there was a royal reception for the people bringing the Bikurim. And the Kohen had to Nufa, the Kohen took the basket and he swirled it above the head of this man who brought the Bikurim. And the man who brought the Bikurim had vidui meiser, that he had to make like a speech. And the Torah tells you exactly what he was obligated to say. Now, he began with Arami Oived Avi, that Lavan wanted to kill Yaakov Avinu. And the story beginning, and then we went on to Mitzrayim, the whole thing, but he begins his speech with Yaakov Avinu. So the Meforshim ask a second question. First question was, why is Bikurim right after Amalek? And the second question is, if you're beginning with reminiscence and history of Klal Yisrael, why don't you first talk about Avram Avinu, and then Yitzchak, and then mention Yaakov? But the answer is that Bikurim represents Hakoras Hatov. When they went through the Midbar, there were nations that came out to fight them, Sichon and Og, and all these nations wanted to stop them from coming into Eretz Yisrael and possessing it. So when they got there after all the turmoil, and then they had to come to Eretz Yisrael, and they had to fight the 31 kings that lived there to acquire, took them 7 years, and then 7 years to divide the land. This became a possession with great thirst and love. You know, it's like Hakoras Hatov. If a person was never sick or never in a hospital, and we should never be, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, but the person who was sick and had to be for 2 months in the hospital, when he comes out, he appreciates good health much better than the person who was never in his life in a hospital. If a person was always rich, he was born into a family of wealth, he could never appreciate money the way the person who struggled to pay an electric bill or pay a food bill, a grocery bill, because he had to scrape together the money, put it together, make cheshbonos. The rich guy didn't have to even think about the money. So a rich man could never have the appreciation of money equal to the person who had no money and then became rich. He's going to appreciate the money more so than the other guy. So Amalek's goal was to keep Klal Yisrael out of Eretz Yisrael. So the reason that we read the Parsha of Amalek right before we begin Savo and delve into the beautiful deepness and the greatness of what was expressed in the historical reminiscence of what happened to Klal Yisrael, and you look at the psukim, it's the actual psukim, 6 or 8 psukim, which talk about the description of what the man said. Now, since Bikurim were like the symbol of Klal Yisrael going into Eretz Yisrael, and they had to fight to get there, and they had to fight after they got there, so this was a full-hearted expression of the person who didn't have Eretz Yisrael and then acquired Eretz Yisrael, planted and toiled to produce the beautiful, luscious fruits that came forth, so he could truly express that appreciation for Bikurim, because he didn't have Eretz Yisrael, and now he did. And that's why it's put right next to Amalek, who wanted to deny his coming into Eretz Yisrael. And Avram and Yitzchak were almost all their lives in Eretz Yisrael. They went out of Eretz Yisrael, not Yitzchak. Yitzchak never stepped foot out of Eretz Yisrael. He was an Oila Tamima, and he was not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. But Avram left for a short time, 90 days down to Mitzrayim, but he lived his whole life. After he was told, Lech lecha me'artzecha mi'moladetecha mi'beis avicha, coming into Eretz Yisrael and staying there. But Yaakov Avinu, he began the history of Klal Yisrael's wandering. The last 17 years of his life, he was in Mitzrayim. And he went from here to there and there to here. So Yaakov Avinu is really, when you're expressing Hakoras HaTov and thanks, appreciation, gratitude for all the first fruits, to express the appreciation for living in Eretz Yisrael and beginning with the exile and the travels and the tribulations of Yaakov Avinu and what he lived through. And that's why the speech of the person who brought the Bikurim began the historical reminiscence with Yaakov and not with Avram Avinu. Now, we know that he said, one of the things he said was V'yanisa v'yamarta lifnei Hashem Elokecha Arami oived avi. That Lavan, the troublemaker, wanted to destroy my forefather Yaakov Avinu. Right away on that pasuk, Rashi says V'yanisa v'yamarta, that she'eincha kafui toiva, and it's a medrash that quotes this, that he's quoting, and he says, Rashi, that this expression and this speech shows you that he was not a denier of good. So all the Mefarshim ask, why is it that he began his speech? And Rashi says that we see from his speech that he was not denying the good. Why did he have to say it in the negative? Say that he was a makir tov, not she'eincha kafui tova, that he was not a denier of the good done for him, but rather say that he's recognizing and expressing his words to tell us how appreciative he is of the good that happened to him and be makir tov. So the answer that is given is that what I just got done telling you, that a person who doesn't have something can become appreciator of the graciousness of what's being done for him, min hashamayim. And that's why he began his speech, V'yanisa v'yamarta, says Rashi, that he was not a lacker in a denier of the good done for him. And that's what he's saying, because he understood what it means to be without it, not the person who always had it. Now, the Al-Shech HaKadosh says, and he quotes, and it's a very famous Al-Shech HaKadosh, and as I told you, there were only 6 people who had the whole Klal Yisrael bestow on them the title Kadosh, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, the Al-Shech HaKadosh, the Shaloh HaKadosh. There were 6 that had that. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who was the only Tana in the history of Klal Yisrael, or Amora, that they got the title Kadosh. And that was Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who put together all of the Mishnayos, and the first Tana was Shimon HaTzadik, and the last was Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He saw people were forgetting, so he put Torah Sheba'al Peh, the Mishnayos, the Gemara. He wrote it down, which was something which was not supposed to be. And as Tosfos says in the Gemara in Gittin, that the reason that there was a Torah Shebiksav and a Torah Sheba'al Peh, why not make everything Torah Shebiksav? So Tosfos answers, because there was going to be an Ummah that would stand up at some juncture and claim that they're the God-given, the Am HaNivcher, that they're the nation that God wanted, and they'll copy the Torah Shebiksav, and that's the First Testament and the New Testament. In other words, Torah Shebiksav, the Kedusha that we have of Chamisha Chumshei Torah, that is Torah Shebiksav. And when the Catholics came, they put together what they claimed as a New Testament, but they were unable to copy the Torah Sheba'al Peh. They couldn't master it. And that was the reason it was given as an oral testament. But the Rabbeinu HaKadosh saw that they couldn't remember everything. They were beginning to forget, so we call it Eis Lasos Lashem, Heferu Torasecha, and they wrote down the Mishnayos and the Gemara, the subsequent Amoraim. Now, the Alshich HaKadosh asked the following question. The Yalkut says, the Medrash says, that on the word Bereshis Bara Elokim, that Rashis, there are three things referred to in the Torah as Rashis. One is the Torah, one is Klal Yisrael, and one is Bikurim. And for these three things, the world was Kedai Bereshis Bara Elokim, says the Medrash, that the world was worthy, and it was a worthy effort to create the world and go through everything that we went through with the Mabul, with everything, for these three things to exist: that there should be a Torah in the world, that there should be a Klal Yisrael in the world, and there should be Bikurim. So asks the Alshich HaKadosh, the Torah we understand, that's the backbone, that's the cementing factor of Klal Yisrael. And Klal Yisrael, the Am HaNivcher, make everything happen, and everything swirls around Klal Yisrael. But what is this Bikurim that would be put on the same plateau as the Torah and as Klal Yisrael? That Bikurim, that's such a bit. Why? That's bigger than Shabbos. That's bigger than Tefillin. So the Alshich HaKadosh answers, because the essence of Bikurim was Hakaras HaTov. And you can have a world with Torah and a world with Klal Yisrael, and if they don't have Hakaras HaTov, then it was a deficiency in the creation of the world. And that's why Bikurim, which brings out the essence of Hakaras HaTov, is so important and equated to the Torah and to Klal Yisrael. So says the Alshich HaKadosh. Now, in the Sedra, we have the Tochacha. And the Tochacha scared the wits out of Klal Yisrael. As a matter of fact, the next Sedra is Nitzavim. And right away, when Moshe Rabbeinu saw how afraid they were of the Toichacha, what it said, that you'll be cursed for this and you're going to be cursed for that, and they said we're not going to be able to survive. How could we live with all these rules, regulations, and every little infringement, there's a curse here, there's a curse there. So Moshe Rabbeinu answered and said, Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem, that you're all standing here. Don't be so afraid. You went through so many tests and so many events of destruction. You wanted this, you wanted that. There was a plague, 20,000, 24,000 died for this, for that. But meantime, you're here as a Klal Yisrael. Atem nitzavim hayom. You survived, you exist. So don't be so afraid. But the Tochacha, as we go through it, you see that it is a pretty demanding thing of Klal Yisrael. And before we go into the Tochacha, I just want to say to you that the Medrash says that when Moshe Rabbeinu saw that the Bais Hamikdash was going to be destroyed and there would be no Bikurim, that's why the Medrash says it, because our Bikurim are in our Parsha, he was Koveya Tefillah. Now, at the beginning of Shemona Esrei, and this whole connection of Klal Yisrael to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we never fully realized, because if we went in front of a queen or a king, we would have that feeling, you know, I don't want to say lahavdil, but when the ambassador of Israel was sent to be the ambassador for Eretz Yisrael in England, so he had to present his paperwork, his credentials to the Queen of England. And he talked about his experience with having come into the Queen, that you take 3 steps and then you bow. You take another 3 steps as you get closer to the Queen and you bow again. And this bow was a submission to the person, deferring to the power and prestige of the royalty and the majesty that they possessed. But bowing is not only submission, but it is an expression of the appreciation. So when Moshe Rabbeinu saw that Bikurim would be destroyed, so where would people revive and live with the backbone of appreciation in their lives? He made tefillah, and that's why we have 2 bows at the beginning of Shemona Esrei, which the Meforshim, the Vilna Gaon, talks about it, that it's submission, and Tosfos disagrees with him and says that it means Hakaras Hatov. As we say in the last 2 brachas, Hatov Shimcha, or Modim Anachnu Loch, or Hatov Shimcha Ulocha Noel Lahodos. And it's a very famous discussion of the Vilna Gaon about what Hishtachava means. And they have this discussion on the end of our parsha of Bikurim. It says, V'hishtachavisa lifnei Hashem Elokecha, and you bow. So what is that bowing, says the Vilna Gaon? It is submission. Tosfos says it's not submission, it is Hakaras Hatov. And both opinions are correct, because that's what Moshe Rabbeinu wanted when he was Koveya, that there should be the expression every day, 3 times a day, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, 2 times the Araisa, and myriad a little bit, 1 notch a little lower, that there should be existing by Klal Yisrael the tefillah. which would be the vehicle to express their submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and their appreciation. Now, we know that at the very beginning of these klolos, one more thing I want to say, which again the Al Shach HaKadosh says, that the pasuk in this speech that the man who brought the Bikurim said, he says, one of the items in talking about the history of Klal Yisrael, Vayareyu lanu hamitzrim vaye'anunu. So Vayareyu osanu is what the pasuk says, which means that they made us bad. And says the Al Shach, it shouldn't say Vayareyu osanu, that they made us bad. What they should have said, what the pasuk should have said, Vayareyu lanu. They were bad to us. They killed us, they hit us, they did everything terrible. So it should say lanu and not osanu. Says the Al Shach that a person in Olam Hazeh who sees bad becomes bad. In other words, if you take children and you put them in front of the television set, and they're watching this one take out a sword and kill that one, they take out a gun and they're shooting this one and that one, they can't be as sensitive as a child who never saw a television. That if they walk out in their life and they're 18, they're 38, they're 68, and they walk out of their house and they go out to the street, they see somebody pull out a gun and kill someone, they'll be in a state of shock with that which happened in front of their eyes. They learned about killing and about saving a life and what the value of a life. But a kid that's sitting in front of a television, watching this one being killed and that one being shot, and he fills up his mind, it has to affect his fabric as a person in the sensitivity level. And that's why the Skver Rebbe, Zecher Tzedek L'Bracha, made Square Town. He didn't want that the people in his town, his Hasidim, and their children and their grandchildren should ever see a television. For what? To waste the time and to become used to seeing killing and all of the dimensions of it, the other things that we see happening within the framework of that umbrella, under that umbrella. So says the Al Shach HaKadosh that's the reason the pasuk says Vayareyu osanu, because they made us bad. You know, I don't know if I should quote her or not, but Golda Meir once said, I forgive the Arabs that our boys had to kill some of them, that there was murder in defense of Eretz Yisrael. But what I will never forgive them for, making them used to murdering people. And the innocents come back from a war, they're not so innocent anymore. They were busy killing. And that's why you should know the Meforshim, I think the Ramban and others, when it comes to Ir HaNidachas that we read about in Parshas Re'eh, that an Ir HaNidachas is a city where somebody came and convinced the entire city to become Oivdei Avodah Zorah. And there's a mitzvah to go into the city because they're serving Avodah Zarah, men, women, children, and to kill everybody out. So the Mefarshim says that the pasuk ends up with the word V'richamcha, and Hashem will have pity on you. And the Mefarshim say, what does it mean He'll have pity? It means that even though they went in to do the mitzvah of Ira Nidachas and they became such murderers, they're going to come back home wholesome, innocent people, as if they never killed in their life. So it's important for us to put in the backbone of the minds of our students and our own children at home a value system that we shouldn't have it watered down to a point that human life is meaningless and so what? I just saw 20 people being killed and whatever on the television or wherever they're looking at it. Now, there are 11 statements of klolos. And when the klolos were delivered, Klal Yisrael, there were certain shvatim that stood on Har Eval, and there were certain shvatim, the rest of them, on Har Grizim. On Har Grizim, they heard all the brachos, because if you look in the Sedra, you will see that there's a whole litany, all the psukim, Baruch Atah this, Baruch Atah, you will be blessed and you will be successful and you will, all of these things. And then it goes into a long thing that you're going to be cursed. Now, by the curses, there are 11 statements of Orur Atah, you will be cursed. If you make a pesel masecha, you make a avodah zarah, and you serve the avodah zarah, you're going to be cursed in your lifetime and in your daily living. That the next one is Orur Makeh Aviv V'imo, someone who hits a father or a mother and they end up with the slightest blemish, like a blood clot, or they brought forth blood from the father or mother, so there's a terrible curse on him doing that to his father or mother. And then there's a curse of Masig Gevul Reyehu, that if you have a grocery store and that's your parnasa, somebody shouldn't come, and there's a curse on him. If right next door he opens up a fancier and a better grocery store and he kills the parnasa of the guy who had first the grocery store there. And what I want to point out to you is that that between each pasuk of these curses there is a samach. Now, if you take a look, many, I'm sure you're aware, and there may be some of you who are not aware, that throughout the Torah, you will find suddenly at the end of a pasuk or a place, a pei, the letter pei. Or you will see a samach. Now, a pei means it's psucha, it's open. It's either continuing into the original discussion or idea of what was expressed into the next pasuk or the next parsha. And if there is a samach there, then it means it's stuma, that it's a statement in and of itself with no connection to the next statement being made. Now, usually a samach comes after 20 psukim, 30 psukim, whatever. But in this parsha, in Parshas Ki Savo, when it says the curses, it has a samach after each and every one. I'm not talking about the tochacha. The tochacha goes into all of the psukim of if Klal Yisrael doesn't keep the Torah and doesn't do the mitzvahs, what's going to happen. But before it, there are 11 items listed with separate curses on the person if indeed he does any one of these things. But there is one exception. When it says, Ore mata mishpat ger yasom v'almana, that somebody who purposely mistreats in their judgment, like a judge or a rov in his adjudicating an issue with people, that if a person twists, that's mate mishpat, twists into the wrong column, the decision given out after he hears between the Yosem and the Almana against whomever it is or against them, and he twists in favor of not what the halacha is, but he had some negiyas. And after that curse, there's no some. The others, the 10 have, but the 11th doesn't. Because it goes into the parsha of Arroyos. And Arroyos, say the Meforshim, Arroyos has an effect, like let's say somebody put poisonous gas and they're living in their house, they have regular air in their house, and somebody throws a grenade or a whatever and all the poisonous gas comes out and goes into the atmosphere. So we can't say that, well, I'm in my own house, what do I have to do with that gas? Well, that's going to seep into your house and it's going to contaminate or kill people because it's poisonous. So when somebody mistreats or twists the judgment of a yasom, a orphan, or an almana, or a ger, they're all three stated in the pasuk. So there is an atmosphere of contamination that is carried out into the community. In other words, a person can't say that, okay, the judge was bribed or the judge liked the family of one and was good friends, so he twisted the judgment. So that he did an aveira, he did a terrible thing, and he'll be affected or pay the price after 120 years with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But when that happens, it's like poisoning an atmosphere. It's doing something that's going to drag down the level of spirituality and materialistically for the entire town where it's happening. And that's why there is no samach at the end of that pasuk, because it leads into the arroyos, to all the incest and all the improper relations that a person could have, and he should know that he can't say, well, listen, we're two consenting adults. What does it have to do with Klal Yisrael? I'm in a house alone with two people, a man and a woman. They're doing whatever they want. We're not hurting anyone. And if we're doing Averis, we will pay for it. They should know that Arroyos is the item that has a dimension to it that affects unbelievably so, and I'm not going to go into a number of stories that there were problems going on in a community, and they came to the tzaddikim and they said that why are young children dying? 8 children, lo aleinu lo aleichem, in the last 2 months died suddenly. Why is it happening? And they would point either to treif, to to tarfus. There was a lack of kashrus. They didn't know that they were eating meat from a butcher that was putting treif meat into it. That's why it was happening. Or it was arroyos, private arroyos, two consenting, but it's like the poisonous gas that goes out into the community, and it affects everybody. And that's the reason why there is no samach after orur, mate mishpat yasom, ger yasom v'almana. Now, speaking of the first fruits that were brought to because I didn't finish the thought, I only began to express part of it. The original Alshich question, why is Bikurim so important and so much? And that is because the Gemara says that when people brought their Bikurim, the rich people brought it in silver and gold vessels. But the poor people who had no money and they gathered their simple Bikurim, they had to take from the field some shabby leftover leaves and plants to make a basket, because it says hatene biyodech. They had to come with a basket. And the basket, the Gemara says, of the rich, when they gave the kohen the gold, beautiful gold vessel that they put their bikurim in, that the kohen took out from those golden and silver, the bikurim, and they gave back to their balabas their tray or their basket, their golden basket. But the poor people who came to them and presented to the kohen in their simple basket, the kohanim took the basket and the bikurim, and they didn't give anything back. The basket didn't go back to the person. And the Gemara says there, basar an yuaso, ozla an yuaso, that the poor get poorer and the rich get richer because they got back their golden keli. But the poor people didn't even get back their shabby basket. Says the Meforshim, why? It was to protect the embarrassment of, because this situation of coming in was in front of Klal Yisrael, and the basket was given to the kohen, and if the kohen took out the fruits from the golden basket, there was nothing to be embarrassed. It was a shining, gorgeous, expensive basket and vehicle of how they brought their bikurim. But if the kohanim would have taken out the fruits from the poor man's basket, the whole Klal Yisrael would have been standing there looking at the shabbiness and the poverty of this man, and it would have been humiliating. So to save the humiliation of the poor man, the entire basket was not emptied out, it was just taken and kept. And that, says the Alshich HaKadosh, is why the world was created and worthy of being created for the Torah, Klal Yisrael, and Bikurim, to bring out a lesson in life to each and every person in their dealing with other people, that there has to be a rare sensitivity to the feelings and the public embarrassment of another Yid. Now, in the Klala, it says, Uva'u alecha kol habrachos ha'ele v'hisigucha. that first it says the good, Baruch atah b'voecha, Baruch atah b'tzeisecha. It says everything good, that you'll have a lot of goodness in your life for this, for that, for this or that. And then after stating all the different types of brachos, it says, Uvo alecha kol ha-brachos ha'ele v'hisigucha, and they will reach you. So obviously the Mefarshim asked that if it says that all the brachos will come on you, what do you mean v'hisigucha, and they'll reach you? Of course, if they're coming to you, it's going to make a difference with you, and it's going to stay there. It's going to reach you. So the Mefarshim explain that v'hisigucha is a separate bracha, because a lot of times people who didn't have the bracha before, they were poor. And then they opened a business, they became rich. A lot of times they do not remain the same human beings that they were all of their life up to the time they became rich. And richness is a very big test in how we treat people. And richness doesn't have to mean $100 million. A person could just be a comfortable balabas. And when he greets someone at the door, he shouldn't think, well, I'm the balabas and I've got the money, and this guy came to me with his hat in hand and I'm doing him the biggest favor. You should know, as I always say to you, tzedakah is the only mitzvah that says, Mevi Geula, you bring the redemption to the world, Mashiach, through tzedakah, and it also says Tatzil Mimaves. Now it doesn't say by any other mitzvah, Tatzil Mimaves. It doesn't say you keep Shabbos well, Tatzil Mimaves, you'll be saved from death, or Tefillin, that you'll be saved from death. So the point being that there is a separate bracha, a bracha to a person, that when we get the bracha, that we can remain humble in our frame of mind, that just like you got the money so fast, you can lose the money just as fast. And a person who has a thinking process which he uses, and he understands that this was only a bracha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it was something special as a gift given to him. And that's the separate bracha of v'hisigucha, that you will remain who you are. And when you get the abundance, that you will not lose that frame of mind of humility and appreciation. Now, the Balaturim says on the pasuk, "Ulasitcha elyon al kol hagoyim ha'ela lechavod ulasifaris." Everyone's curious, what's this lechavod ulasifaris? If the pasuk says that if you keep the Torah, ulasitcha elyon, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to put you on top of the goyim. You are going to be the administrators of distribution of food, of this, of that, all the good that you will be put on top of the goyim. And why does it have to end off? With lechavod ulasifaris. So says the Balaturim. Don't forget, the Balaturim was the son of the Rosh, and Tzadikim Gemurim said that if somebody learns Tur Shulchan Aruch, He's metaher and mezachech his neshama. So the Balaturim, that's the Torah Shulchan Aruch, but the same person was the Balaturim, and he was the son of the Rosh. So the Balaturim says, and he quotes a medrash, that the Rabbanu Shalom, if a Yid is like this and good, and he's doing the mitzvahs, so then he puts a crown on everything that Yid does and keeps it next to his kisei hakavod. And when the person is nifter, he puts it onto the person, all the crowns that he accumulated in his lifetime. But the Medrash concludes and says, which is a little scary, Avol Misha Shochach, that someone like who forgets himself, where he is, and Soch Sichas Chulin B'Bais HaMedrash, and he talks about the stock market, he talks about politics, or he talks about this or that, and he's sitting in the Bais HaMedrash, and we're not even talking about in the middle of davening, which Nebuch, in yeshiva, I never saw it in my 10 years in Torah V'das, that somebody after Baruch She'amar should say one word. I never in my life saw it, or in myriad. Unfortunately, in some of the shuls where you stop in for a mincha or myriad or whatever it is, that I've seen people literally say Baruch Hu, start the first bracha, and somebody walks up to them and starts talking and they answer. But I never saw this in my life in yeshiva. So this medrash that the Balaturim brings, that the person, all these brachas in our sedra, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts crowns on the mitzvahs and the maisim tovim, and then puts it on the person. Avol misha soch sichas chulin bebeis hakneses. So every time he talks, there is another thorn put waiting for him when he is nifter in Shemayim, and there's a whole yard, a whole field of prickly thorns that are presented to the person for one reason, that he spoke in shul idle talk. And that's not in the middle of davening. It's referring to just in a makom that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that people come and I listen to their tefillah, that's a makom of tefillah, a makom of learning, that a person's talking, he places himself in a terrible position, and this is what's waiting for him. So we have to try better, that when it says "Ulesim sitcha elyon al kol hagoyim," the lechaver l'sefaris, to create those lechaver l'sefaris, all those crowns for the people who are doing what they are supposed to be doing. Now the pasuk says at one point, at the end of this, that when you keep all the mitzvahs and lishmor mitzvosai chukosai, it ends up and it says v'lishmoa bekolo, and to listen carefully to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's voice. Now the question asked, the Ramban talks about, what's this lishmoa bekolo? If the first part of this pasuk is you kept all the Torah, and you do the chukim, and you do the mishpatim, and you do the mitzvahs, and so you have to say lishmoa bekolo. You just got done saying that you are doing everything. So why does it have to say lishmoa bekolo? So the Meforshim say a very important message about offshoot. The ripple effect. That means a person could be enthusiastic and could be so happy and thrilled about a new thing that he's going to be doing because he heard a speech or he got done learning a piece of Gemara that inspired him, it uplifted him to the heavenly heights. But then he begins to cool off. So the Mefarshim say, yes, you keep all the mitzvahs, but what about a day later, a month later, a week later? You got done doing all the mitzvahs and suddenly what's happening to you? That's v'lishmoa b'kolo. To be able to have the ramifications of that which we do in a showcase that we could maintain the level of achievement. And that's the pshat that Rabbi Balkany says, that miyale bahar Hashem, who could muster the spiritual strength to really grab hold of himself and go up each and every day of his life. And there are many who are zoichet to it. That's miyale bahar Hashem. But the end of the pasuk is umiyakum bimkom kodsho. Who is able to maintain the posture and position of remaining on that step that he worked and toiled to get to, and to go on to the next step, but not to fall back.